going to move forward. Still in the first 100 days. Okay, we're going to be in the first 100 days for a long time. Okay, lots going to get done here. So, first slide next for today is the development of the SEC. Now, not the Securities and Exchange, not the not the Southeastern Conference, but the Securities and Exchange Commission. Okay. Now, this is to deal with the stock market. Okay, so obviously the stock market had some problems. Yes. Yes, it did. It keeps turning off on me. See the words on there. So, the SEC, is it still around today? Yes, it is. Okay, a lot of these things that we talked about are still surviving close to 100 years later, right? So, this is going to regulate the stock market and prevent abuses. When it says license and regulate the stock exchanges, so the NASDAQ, the Standard & Poor's, the New York Stock Exchange, you can even talk about the Chicago Mercantile. Those of you guys, farming community people, understand, like this is where, hogs and cattle are traded on the market, on the mercantile, okay, the exchange, okay. So those have to be licensed by the SEC, okay. The SEC can require data on stocks and bonds of publicly traded companies. So if you sell stock to the public, the SEC can require that you provide information. Okay, so like before you invest in something, you should know who manages those funds, who the CEO is, what the outlook for that company is. You should be able to find out what their assets are, what their liabilities are. These are all things that should be public knowledge. So when earnings reports come out, they print these up. Now, most of them are online, but they used to mail them to you. If you own somebody's stock, they would mail you that information because you are a shareholder. This type of stuff is required. They also regulate, the SEC does, the activities of investment advisors. Guys, you can't just graduate from high school and go up and, rent a building on North Ridge Road and say, stocks are us, and become a stockbroker. Okay, you got to be licensed. Okay, and so the state of Kansas, there's a process you got to go through. One of my former students, Carson Proct, he played baseball for me here, and just graduated from George Mason University, and he's going to go work for his dad, who is a financial advisor. And I talked to his mom last week, and she goes like, yeah, he's studying for his exams so he can be licensed. Okay, so you want to be a real estate agent, you got to get licensed. You want to be a teacher, you got to get licensed. Okay, so this is, so you don't want investment advisors that don't know what they're doing. And so it's good that we have these licensing. Now, are there investment advisors that break the law and go to jail? Yeah, have you guys ever heard this guy, Bernie Madoff? Know about Bernie Madoff? I mean, one of the largest scams in American history. This guy was the investor of the wealthy, the famous. Okay, a lot of names that you've heard of invested with this guy. And what he did, he said, listen, if you invest with me, I'm going to get you really good return on your money. And so he would take all this millions and millions and millions of dollars. And Bernie Madoff lived this extravagant lifestyle. It was all a facade. He was taking the money that he would get, spending it himself, and then printing out fake, like, returns what people were getting. Like, it was all fake. And eventually, the SEC caught on to him, and this guy went to prison for life. Okay, how many of you guys have ever heard of Martha Stewart? You guys know Martha Stewart? She's like a homemaker, like, how would you describe it? Arts and crafts, homemaking. She actually had a show with Snoop Dogg for a while, right? Did you guys, any of you guys see that? Yeah, that was fun. I like Snoop. You know, he's a cool cat. What were we gonna say?
I thought you like this tub. She like put people in jail.
Yeah, she went to jail. Why did she go to jail? Huh? No. Insider trading. Okay. So guys, if you work for, say, Boeing, right, and you're like the vice president of operations of Boeing, okay, and you have insider information as to what's going on at Boeing, if you act on that information before it is public knowledge, that is illegal. Okay. Now, so you're a software engineer at Boeing and you own Boeing stock and you know there's something wrong with the software on the 787 MAX. And you sell, you know, say you have 1,000 shares of Boeing and you sell it. And then the news about this software comes out like 2 days later. Alarm bells are going to go off at the SEC. And that's what happened with Martha Stewart. She owned 19,000 shares of a stock called Inclone that her investment advisor, you know, hey, invest in this company. Well, this company was about to get some really bad news, and her investment advisor found out about it. He contacted Martha Stewart and said, hey, we should sell your stock because they're about to have some bad news. It's about to go public. So she sold 19,000 shares. Now, 2 days later, this news comes out, and the SEC opens an investigation. Okay, they get a hold of her investment advisor. He rolls over on her. He gets a sweetheart deal. She's made an example of. So the government made an example of Martha Stewart, somebody famous that used insider trading, and she went to prison. Okay, now she went to a blue collar prison. Excuse me, a white collar prison. Okay, I had this guy. So my son played baseball growing up, and there was this guy. We joined 2 teams, and he was an investment advisor up in Valley Center. And this guy was shady. Like, he's a smooth talker. He got busted. He stole $1 million from his father-in-law, investment advisor. So he went to prison. He got 5 years. He went to North Dakota. From what I understand, this prison in North Dakota is like, you could walk out of it. But if they catch you, you're going to the other kind of prison. You know what I mean? So he just had to do his time. And, you know, you can't leave. You're not supposed to leave. You can't leave. And you're in jail, basically. But it's not like your typical prison. You know what I mean? It's different. So they call it kind of a white collar thing. So this is what the SEC does, okay? They also, the government gave the Federal Reserve Board the power to fix margin rates. So remember margin loans? People could maybe put down 20% and borrow 80%, which is kind of crazy. So we still allow margin loans, but the ratio is much different now. So maybe more like you have 80%, you borrow 20%, different type of margin here. So SEC is still around, and they do investigate fraud and so forth. Okay. Any questions on that? That's pretty easy. Securities and Exchange Commission. Then we have the CCC. I think somebody in here is going to read a book about that. You're going to read about CCC? Now, what made you, oh, we're not there yet. Sorry, I got one more thing before we get there. What made you interested about CCC?
Just seeing all of the, I think we travel a lot.
Oh, okay. When you go to like national parks and stuff?
Yeah, I like finding the state build for the state parks.
Yeah. You're right up my alley. I love that stuff. Okay, we'll talk about that in just a second. Okay. So Roosevelt's new president, and one of his campaign promises is to balance the budget. Now, if you're trying to balance your budget at home, right? You've got to either make more money or spend less money. Yes? So for the government, they can do the same thing. They can tax more, or if there's economic growth, give more taxes, or you can cut spending. So Roosevelt's plan was a mixture, and he wanted to cut government spending, but here's what he wanted to cut. He wanted to cut government wages, people that work for the government, and he wanted to cut veterans' pensions. Now, is this going to be popular with the American people? Is it going to be popular with Congress? No, and he needs Congress, okay, to pass this bill. So we're going to get creative here. Roosevelt's going to get creative, all right? Now, prohibition is still the law of the land, and this is why we have beer up here, okay? Prohibition is still the law of the land. Now, the 21st Amendment, as you guys probably know, is going to repeal the 18th Amendment, yes? The amendment has been proposed by Congress, but it's got to be ratified by the states. That takes time. At the time, we only had 48 states. Okay, Alaska and Hawaii don't come online until 1959. Okay, there's 48 states. You need 34 states to ratify the 21st Amendment in order to repeal prohibition. So in the meantime, while that's taking place, Roosevelt and the Democrats are going to do something creative to get this economy bill passed. They're going to attach, here's the balanced budget bill that's going to cut wages and pensions. They're going to attach to that bill an amendment to the bill that will legalize beer and wine. And so this bill will pass all together, and he will get his cuts. So, as this is explained in the notes, Congress had proposed the 21st, sent it to the states for ratification. While that was happening, Roosevelt submitted a bill to legalize beer and wine, attached it to the economy bill, so Congress wouldn't wait to pass it. So you would legally be able to drink beer and wine before the 21st Amendment was ratified by the states. Now I say legally. Well, the 18th Amendment is still the law of the land. Okay? Now, it's going to be a little bit confusing. I want to explain this. This is called an earmark. You haven't had government yet. Okay? So, earmark, an amendment. Sometimes people refer to this as pork. Attachment. Okay, these are all the same thing. Okay, this is a bill. Okay, so guys, September 30th, our government's going to run out of money. Right? Have we talked about this? Our government's going to run out of money on September 30th. Okay. So they're going to try and pass a bill to fund the government for January of 2025. Okay. So this would just be a spending bill to fund the government, increase the national debt. Okay. Now, in the House of Representatives, because this is going to spend money, it's got to start in the House of Representatives. Okay. Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, attached to this bill something called the SAVE Act, which would require proof of citizenship to vote in American elections. Okay? They brought this up for a vote last week. And it failed. Okay? Democrats, every Democrat voted against this. The whole bill. It's all one bill. Okay? Now, if they take this out of the bill, this will pass. Because you'll get Democrats and Republicans. Some Republicans will vote against it because it's increasing the national debt. And they're not cutting anything, just spending more money. So, guys, when I say an amendment to the bill, this is not a constitutional amendment. It's an earmark. The amendment is a change to the bill. Okay? Constitutional amendment is different. So this gets a little bit confusing. Do you understand what I'm saying here? Can you explain this to me on the test? You want me to say it again? Say it again? Explain it again? Okay, real quick. Okay, so I want to write on this. Okay, so this is the original bill that's going to do this. It's unpopular. So they add something to it. A change to just the bill, not the Constitution. So this is a beer. Oh, okay. What is going on? Okay. So this is an earmark to this bill. And it will allow people to drink beer and wine before the 21st Amendment is ratified. Okay. Now, it's not really legal because the 18th Amendment is still the law of the land until it's ratified. Okay. But people felt safe. It's like marijuana, right? In Colorado, marijuana, the federally banned substance. Did we change the federal law, or is Colorado just flaunting the law? It's the latter. They're flaunting the law. Marijuana is still illegal in Colorado. They're just not going to charge you with a crime for it. Does that make sense? So they've decriminalized. They haven't made it legal. They can't. Because it's federal law. And that's a little bit different here. This is just an earmark. You can add a bunch of other earmarks to this, and Congress does. They're always adding stuff to bills. Okay. All right. So that's a pretty simple thing. All right. Now we move to the C. C. Okay. Now this is the Civilian Conservation Corps. Corps, like Marine Corps, Peace Corps, CORPS. He has to sign. He is signing. Spell it right on the test or miss a point. Do not give me C-O-R-E. Okay? Do not give me C-O-R-P, period. It's not an abbreviation. It's a word. Okay? Now, here's the problem. Unemployment going through the roof. Fewer people going to college. So you got a lot of young men your age that can't find jobs and have nothing to do. Idle men. Idle young men. What's going to happen? Usually it's not good, right? You got a bunch of young men with nothing to do. And they're poor. Okay? So here's an idea. Let's send them out to the wilderness. And guys, when I say wilderness, I mean wilderness. They're going to go out and live off the land. Okay, they're going to where there are no grocery stores. So they're going to have to kill their own food or fish for their own food, create their own shelter, and so forth. Okay? They're going to send 250,000 young men between the ages of 18 and 25. Now, here's some of the things they're going to do. They're going to help preserve national resources. They're going to, in the national parks, they'll build trails, buildings, infrastructure for the national parks. Okay, they'll plant trees, stock fish in lakes and rivers, build fire lanes, wilderness trails, restore historic sites from the Revolutionary War, even the Civil War. Okay, young men. Now, did any of you guys have Mr. Kenton? Okay. Did he ever tell you his grandfather served in the CCC? Yeah, his I think it was his grandfather. Could have been his father. I don't know. I think it was his grandfather. Guy. So you were mentioning the national parks. So which national parks have you been to? A lot. So let me just name some. Have you been to Glacier? Yellowstone?
Yes.
Yosemite? Okay. Acadia in Maine?
Not hung up.
Everglades? Florida?
We get close to it. We
Okay.
get fully in
Grand Canyon? I haven't been there.
Carlsbad.
Carlsbad? Okay.
Out in Oklahoma, it's a national recreation area, but it's still managed by the park.
Okay. So when you go to the national parks, guys, you're gonna see signs that say CCC. Now this ends in 1930 or 1942. So this is one that is not still around. Okay. But this is a good picture here. You can see this is a camp with the CCC. It went from 33 to 42. And guys, they're in the middle of nowhere. Okay. If you look at Yellowstone, before it was Yellowstone, okay, National Park. Any of you guys ever watched that show, Yellowstone? The TV show? Okay. Did any of you guys see 1882? The show 1882? It's phenomenal, guys. It's crazy. So this is about Americans that first went to Wyoming. Okay, and this group started in Texas, and I mean they ought to just call it how many different ways there are to die in the West. It's nuts, okay, but it shows you just how hard that was to go out into this wilderness in the 1800s. This is the 1880s. This show, and then there's another one called 1913, I think, which is pretty good as well. But I mean, it's crazy. It's good television, guys. This summer, when you got some time to do some binging, get into that 1882 one. It's fabulous. Okay, and Yellowstone's pretty good too. It's anyhow. What am I talking about? So I've had the pleasure of going to Glacier. Anybody else been? Anybody else the Griswolds? The Griswolds. I travel a lot and go to national parks and stuff. You guys remember Dustin from last year, Stevenson? Okay, they're like that. They go all over the place. Okay, so let me just point out a couple of things. Glacier National Park is up here in northwest Montana. It is beautiful. There's not much around it, guys, and all the campsites are kind of around the outside of the park. So to get to the middle of the park, you got to hike. Okay, there's one road that goes through it called the Going to the Sun Road. It's one of those where you're looking over the cliff when you're driving. If you're scared of heights, it's a tough drive, and I am afraid of heights. It's a little bit of a scary drive, but it's so pristine, guys. So if you go to Glacier, you want to go in the summer, obviously, because it's bad up there in the winter. But even in the summer, my wife and I were there in July, and we camped in tents. You know, we do the rough and stuff. It was cold, I mean, and rainy, and you know, you had to have warm clothes in July. This was July. And the Stevensons went last year, and they was posting pictures on Facebook, and there were some days when it was cold. It snowed actually in July, I think. But anyhow, it's a wonderful place to visit, guys. Now, Yellowstone is here in northwest Wyoming, and Yellowstone's awesome too. The problem with Yellowstone is when you show up there, there's a million other people there that show up at the same time. Okay, and it gets crowded. There's a lot of wildlife in Yellowstone. We saw A lot of bears, saw elk, bison, mountain goats, bighorn sheep. I mean, there was a lot. I didn't see any wolves. Did you guys?
I was like.
Okay. It's crazy because like somebody will see a moose on the side of the road or a bear and they start pulling over. Oh, somebody's pulled over. Well, then they start pulling over. So you got 100 cars pulled over and idiots are getting within like 10 feet of these moose that will kill you. Okay. And then there's the Japanese tourists that show up with their cameras. You know what I mean? Like it's crazy. But it's neat. Old Faithful and so forth. Now, I've never been to Yosemite, which is in California, and based just population-wise, nowadays you've got to get on the calendar and get a reservation to go. Like a lot of them, including now some of you have probably been to Colorado Rocky Mountain National. Okay, now if you go to Colorado, if you go before the sunrise, you don't have to have a reservation. You just drive in. That's what we did. And that's when you want to go anyways, before the sun rises, because when the sun comes up, that's when you see all the animals. I mean, they're out and about as the sun's coming up or going down. That's when you want to go. It's beautiful. If you haven't, gone to Colorado, you should get some friends and go. Leave the county, okay? Just, Kansas is pretty plain. I love it, but it's plain. And I haven't been down here to Grand Canyon. That's on my bucket list. We went to Acadia National Park in Maine, my wife and I and son. We camped there. It's beautiful. And then my wife and kids went to Olympia up in Washington State, which is where they have the huge trees. They call those trees the redwoods. Yeah. Northern California, Washington, that area is nice. The beaches aren't, it's all rock and cliffs and stuff. It's not as nice. If you want to go to the beach, you want to do it on the cheap, you do what most people do, you go to the Gulf Coast of Florida. Beaches are beautiful. So from Panama City over to Pensacola, you can even go to Gulf Shores, Alabama, Orange Beach, Alabama. That's the cheap, you can go there. It's not too overly crowded. But these United States are amazing, okay? And the CCC really helped make that accessible to the American people. So they played an important role. Now, they paid these people, these young men, they paid them $30 a month, so basically about $1 a day. They had to send 25 of that home to their families. Okay, so they got to keep 5. What's up with that? You're working your butt off in the wilderness. Well, where are you going to spend your $30 in the wilderness? There's nowhere to spend that money. What are 18 to 25-year-olds likely to do with that $30 if you give it to them and leave them in the camp together? They're going to gamble it. Now, somebody's going to walk away with more than $30, and somebody's going to lose it. So they said, okay, you can gamble with your $5. Send 25 home. Okay. So this was it's a neat idea, guys. I really like it. I would like to see something like this again, personally. Some countries do it differently, like Israel. I don't know if you guys know this about Israel. Everybody, male and female, in Israel, when they turn 18, graduate from high school, they have to serve 2 years in the military. Mandatory for all men and women. Now, I don't like mandatory, because I don't like being told what to do, you know what I mean? But would not our inner city youth benefit from something like this? So is that targeting our inner city youth, or is that just something like that's available to people? Right. Right. And I think whatever you do needs to be a public-private partnership, because we're in debt too much. We can't be spending too much money on this sort of thing. But a lot, a couple $1 million goes a long way in a program like this, as long as it doesn't become bureaucratic and bloated. Okay, but if you had corporations that would buy into this type of program to get people into the wilderness and learn how to work, learn how to survive, just learn to be self-sufficient. Okay, these people make great employees. I mean, like and leaders, great leaders in your businesses and so forth. So I think corporations could really benefit from helping somebody go through a program like this for a year or so. I think it's a neat idea. Somebody's got to come up with the money for it. But yeah, there's tons of opportunities for that kind of stuff if we had the right leadership to kind of pull it off. Okay. All right, so yeah, CCC is a pretty neat thing. So, all right, we're gonna move on, okay, to the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority. You guys heard of this? Still around, okay? One of the most economically depressed regions of the United States to this day is Appalachia. You guys have all heard of the Appalachian Mountains. What is Appalachia? Okay, so I don't know how well you can see this map. This is North Alabama, Tennessee, North Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, and Kentucky, and up in here is West Virginia. Okay. MTV had a show on a few years ago. It was about people in West Virginia. It was awful. It was kind of like Jersey Shore type thing. It was, but anyhow, this area, my wife grew up in this area in West Virginia. Now, there's quite a few rivers that flow through here. This is all mountainous. Okay, you get into North Alabama, North Georgia, you get into the Smoky Mountains, the Blue Ridge Mountains. It's another name for those. There's one more. Smoky, Blue Ridge, maybe that's it.
Wichita down there.
Wichita down here?
They're closer to Oklahoma.
Okay. Yeah, so, the Appalachians. So this region right has a lot of rivers, okay? But it's mountainous, it's hilly, so it's not good for farming, and there's no industry. So it's economically depressed. So the idea here is to boost the economies by building dams. Okay? So, guys, in the 30s, we're going to start building a bunch of dams, lots of dams. Okay? Everywhere you see words on this map, there's a dam. And when you build a dam, you get a what? What's the proper term? A reservoir or a lake. Okay? And with that dam, you can get hydroelectric power. Is that clean energy? Yes. Yeah. Talk about green energy, clean energy. Okay? Now, it also helps prevent against floods. Any Table Rock people here? Go to Table Rock? Okay. That's it? You ever been to Table Rock? Yeah. You got a place? Your family got a place there? Or?
No, we usually stay at Big Cedar Lodge, though.
Okay. Your family got a place? You know somebody's got a place? See, I'm not a lake person. I grew up on the Florida Gulf Coast. Kansas lakes, I'm sorry, they're awful. Listen, I've been to a few. When you walk out into a Kansas lake, into the water, what are your feet going into? What'd you call it? Sludge? Muck? Nastiness, right? We get a lot of geese in Kansas. What do geese do? They crap all over the place, okay? So, and they are on the water, and the crap's going down and you're walking in this muck. Nasty. And you can't see anything in the water either. First time I went Table Rock, I'm like, wow, this is freaking nice. Like you can see under the water. It's nice. I've been a couple times now, and actually went with the Stevensons one time because my daughter used to date the elder Stevenson. And so anyhow, it's fabulous. Now, it's not the Gulf Coast, though. It's not. But it's nice. And then I went to Oklahoma 2 weeks ago, and another man-made, these are all man-made lakes with dams, you know what I mean? So we've done a lot of this. Now, some people don't like this because what happens to the natural ecology when you build a dam? It's destroyed. What about the wildlife? It gets pushed out of that area, and some of them are going to die. Okay? So some people don't like these dams, but it's clean energy. Okay, you got to weigh this, guys. Now, you need drinking water. Where do we get most of the drinking water for us? Cheney Lake Reservoir, which is really low, right? And so, guys, human progress for ecology. What do you want? Tree huggers? Where you at? Speak up. Now, some of these dams, if you go out to the great Northwest, some of these dams get in the way of fish. Like there's certain fish that like to swim upstream to spawn, and if there's a dam in the way, how's that fish going to get up the dam and spawn? Well, that's when you make salmon cannon. Take the salmon and you put them in this tube and shoot them over the dam up the river. You guys heard of salmon cannon? It's outstanding. Okay. All right, so listen. Do people like to live near the water? So what happens to the property value around these reservoirs?
They go up.
It goes up. Okay, so people build houses and stuff on the water, and oh my gosh, Table Rock has enormous houses. It's crazy. In this lake I went to in Oklahoma, beautiful houses around the lake. So property values go up. You have drinking water. You have cheap electricity. What else goes on that lake? Recreation, fishing, boating, sailing, all kinds of stuff. Economic activity. Okay? Houseboats. You guys ever done a houseboat thing? Go on a houseboat for a week on the lake? We did that when I was a kid. Some lake, it's probably one of these. I was in Kentucky, Lake Cumberland. Kind of boring. You know, just the family on the lake, boathouse for a week, fishing, driving around. Okay. What's next? Yeah. Now, what this is going to also do, guys, is help with irrigation. So farming in the area will increase. Okay, so now farmers, if they want to clear land, they have access to water. Okay, there were 2 World War I munitions plants in this region during World War I that they would make bombs, and they converted these into fertilizer plants. So now you had water, you had fertilizer, you had the makings for better farming in this region. Okay, you had cheap electricity as well. So this is going to improve the livelihood of these communities in this region known as the Tennessee Valley. Okay. And the TVA is still around today that manages these dams. Okay. Now, some people didn't like some of this. Not just the greenies, okay, but also people that felt the government was involving themselves too much in our lives. So, were there other businesses that made fertilizer besides now the government is now in the business of making fertilizer? Now, how does a private fertilizer company compete with the U.S. government? It's difficult, yes? And let's say you ran a coal mine and you provided electricity for people, and then the government builds all these dams, and now people need less coal for electricity because the government's providing cheap hydroelectricity, and you're in trouble as a business. So some people went as far as calling Roosevelt a dictator. Owners of electric companies, fertilizer companies complained that the government was competing unfairly. Now, guys, this is a minority of people that feel this way, but it bears mentioning because you are going to see opposition to some of these programs. Now, personally, I think the man-made lake thing is a really good idea. So good that we kept on doing it in the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. Okay? So whenever you go visit a lake that's man-made, which most of them are in this part of the country, you can look up, when they made the reservoir, made the dam. Okay? Guys, this is a beautiful part of the country if you've never been. At Smoky Mountains. My sister lives in northeastern Tennessee up in here. And we got any Dolly Parton fans in here? Dolly World? Is it called Dolly World? Dollyland? Dollywood. Last year. Dollywood. I do not like country music. But Dolly Parton's pretty cool. We went at Christmas time, so it was packed, and they had lots of good shows and stuff. It's near Gatlinburg, which is another cool place to visit. But you can rent cabins up in these mountains. It's wonderful. It's very beautiful, guys. Right now, like you look at Tennessee. Tennessee is one of the fastest growing states in the country. People are fleeing the cities. They're fleeing California. They're getting out of the Rust Belt. Tennessee has no state income taxes. Okay, so like small town that my sister lives in, Morristown, Tennessee, is blowing up right now. Okay, cost of living is relatively cheap, or at least it was. It gets more expensive when people start showing up because there's shortages of housing, there's shortages of goods, and so prices go up. Ask the people that live in Montana and Idaho who are blowing up right now. Idaho is like, the cost of living has doubled in the last 20 years in Idaho because so many Californians are moving there. So, but, just as long as you don't bring your politics with you when you move to these places, at some point people will move. It'll be a refuge. We're not there yet. There's better options. Are you with me? What time we get down here? Third period, 11:15. Is that right? 50. Okay. Let's go a little further. Ooh. We know housing's a big deal, right? Housing is a problem. And so the government is going to come in and try and fix this problem. Not sure if they're going to make it better, guys, but they're going to try. You guys ever heard this phrase? The road to hell is paved with... Got it, say it.
Good intention.
Good intentions. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Okay. So, homelessness is a big deal. Yes, it's a big problem. So, they're going to kind of do what Hoover did here. Homeowners Loan Corporation, they're going to issue $20 billion in bonds. So the government says, hey, you can buy these bonds. You're going to use that money to help people refinance a mortgage. Okay, so as we talked about the other day, interest rates just came down this last week. If interest rates come down 2.5 points below what your mortgage rate is today, it drops 2.5 points. So say your mortgage rate is 6 and mortgage rates drop to 3.5. It makes sense to refinance. You got to pay for it. It's not cheap. Okay, so the amount, the number that most people is about 2.5%. But the government's going to pay for these refinances at a lower interest rate. Remember, the government has printed a bunch of money. we went off the gold standard, right? So the government wants to get money into people's hands. So they're going to allow you to refinance. They're going to pay for you to refinance your mortgage if you can't afford it. And most people can't afford it. And then, so that makes sense, right? This is good, okay? Then the Federal Housing Administration is created under the National Housing Act. This is still around today, okay? They're going to insure these loans by banks and loan associations. So if Mr. Ebright can't pay his mortgage and the bank's not going to get paid back, the government's going to insure that loan. Does that mean I get to quit paying my mortgage and the government's going to pay my mortgage for me? Yeah, quite possibly. It could mean that, okay? It's also going to insure private groups to refinance mortgage. So I have money and I'm like, okay, I'll refinance some homes, okay? I'll chip in. So you come to me, you want to refinance your home? Okay, you can start paying me your mortgage payment. And then if you fail to pay your mortgage payment, then the government's got me. They're going to pick me up. Okay, so this is like a huge umbrella that protects banks and mortgage companies. And the homeowners as well. So, Big Brother's got us. They got us. All right. You guys remember last year? I don't know if Mr. Jacks talked about this. When we went through the Industrial Revolution and people moved off the farms into the cities, factories, you had to build housing for all those workers. Okay? You remember what they called these housing projects? Dumbbell houses. So if you're looking at this from above, a sky view, looking down at the top of the building, they look like dumbbells. Lifting weight dumbbells, you guys know them. Okay. So these had a lot of poor people living in them. Okay, poor working people, okay, that worked in the factories. And it was cheap. And this area is like a courtyard. Okay. Here's your apartments, okay. And guys, over time, these dumbbell housing projects got run down. And so the government says to the cities, okay, the U.S. housing, no, we got Wagner Steagall. Remember Glass-Steagall? That was the FDIC. Wagner Steagall is the U.S. Housing Authority. So the government's going to loan money to cities and states to clear these slums. Because, guys, that's what they've become. They've become slums. So we're going to clean those up. And we're going to build new ones. We're going to tear down the old slums. And we're going to build new ones. Now, they're not slums when we build them, but they will become them. These are called what? Projects. Now, they're called building projects or housing projects. And the name sticks. Okay, now, some of you guys live in an insulated Northwest Wichita, upper middle class life. Okay. Middle to middle upper class life. Not everybody lives like that. Okay. This is Queensbridge in Queens, New York. This was built by the New Deal. It had 3,142 apartments in it. 3,142 apartments. Now, if you say 4 people live in each of these apartments, you've got over 12,000 people living in this apartment complex. 12,000 people that all share what in common? Which is what? Poverty. They all share that in common. This is government subsidized housing. So in many cases, the government pays part of the rent. The government built it, Government subsidizes it, and people live there. They don't own these apartments. There's no ownership. When you don't own something, you tend not to take care of it. Look at the desks you're sitting in. If anybody, any of those desks have carving in them? Carving into the desk? There you go. Listen, there used to be a rule here at Bishop Carroll. It's a demerit for chewing gum. A demerit. How many guys are chewing gum right now? Now, when you used to not to be able to chew gum, you know how many people are chewing gum? A lot more people chewed gum because they were getting away with something if they did it. And that added a little bit of excitement to it. Yes? Now, if you were caught throwing your gum in the trash, which is what you should do, right? You get a demerit. So what do kids do? Put it under the desk. And at the end of the school year, Carol Aust, who used to be our head janitor, she would get so mad at all cleaning all that gum underneath the desk, which is nasty. Let's be honest. That's nasty. And so Carol Aust complained so much that they changed the rule. Said you guys can chew gum. Okay? And now nobody's chewing gum. It's crazy. Okay? But listen, would you ever stick gum underneath your mother's kitchen table or dining room table? You only do that one time. Okay? Listen, people don't take care of things that they don't own. Okay? And there's something to be said about this, guys. Ownership in society. Like, if we share ownership, and I don't mean that in a literal sense, like we all have a stake in it. Okay, if you have a stake in it, you're gonna take care of it. You're gonna help try and take care of each other. Okay, this did not work out well. This did not work out well. Okay, I'll pick up with do a little bit more on this when we get back tomorrow. Okay, on some of the modern problems that came from this. And guys, we've torn down a lot of these places, and rightly so. All right. That was a long lecture. Sorry.